Thank you for joining us on Journey to 600. Today we're going to be focusing on the neuromuscular section and more specifically on brain lobes. So we'll start off with the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is in the front of the brain and it is more susceptible to traumatic brain injuries because it is right there at the front of our heads. The lobe is important for voluntary movement, expressive language, and for managing higher level executive function. And executive functions refer to a collection of cognitive skills, including planning, organizing, initiating, self monitoring, and controlling responses in order to achieve a goal. Um, Also, the frontal lobes are considered our behavior and emotional control center. So, home to our personalities and who we are. Next, we have the parietal lobe, and it has a vast number of different functions. So, just bear with me as I go through most of them. First off, is the primary cortical area for somatic sensation. You could also sense touch through this lobe and proprioception. It is also associated with the somatosensory vision and auditory activity for analyzing space and transmitting spatial information to the motor system. Um, it also is important in attentional processes and selecting important stimuli from the environment and analyzing visual motion. So this lobe does a lot of sensory and even sensory that is then sent to the motor part of your brain. So it is very interesting what all could be housed in one lobe. Next, we have our temporal lobe, and it also houses a wide variety of different functions. So we'll start off with memory. So your hippocampus is housed here, and it is essential for several memory related processes and abilities. Next, we have language. Language is also housed here, and it gives you the ability to understand the meaning of words and objects. You've probably heard of the Wernicke's area. This is the part of your brain that helps you understand language and form meaningful sentences. You've also probably heard of Broca's aphasia and Broca's area. That's in the frontal lobe, and that's when you have difficulty expressing, whereas Wernicke's is you have difficulty understanding that language and understanding what people are saying to you. Next, we have emotions, and your amygdala is housed in your temporal lobe. So it plays a role in how you experience and process certain emotions. Senses are also housed here, so processing signals from your senses, especially sight and sound. Then last, we have visual recognition. So certain regions of your temporal lobe are key to recognizing visual materials such as familiar faces and knowing objects. Next, we have the occipital lobe, and it is considered the visual processing area of the brain. It is associated with visual spatial processing, distance and depth perception, color determination, object and face recognition, and memory formation. I think you'll notice that also in this lobe and the temporal lobe, they both mention something about facial recognition. And I think that's a very good example of how a lot of this overlaps and we really try to section it off to make it make sense to us. So what I'll say for your NPTE when you're studying for it, just remember the big picture of what each lobe does. Yes, there's going to be some overlap, but the NPTE is not going to have a question where you might be like, well, it might be temporal, it might be occipital, it could be both. They're going to have it they don't want you to have to do that, and they don't want to have to take that question off or something like that because too many people missed it. They want clear cut answers. Next, we have the cerebellar lobe, and it deals with movement, balance, and it can play a role in language processing and memory from what I have in my notes and what I Googled. Um, but This is when, like, if somebody has a stroke or a deficit in their cerebellar lobe, you're going to see like balance impairments, and you're going to see ataxia when they're moving. Uh, but I am going to do a whole other video on each lobe and like deficits that you could see with a stroke or a brain injury. But I felt like I needed to do a video on each lobe and what each lobe does broadly, so then we could dive into deficits that can occur in that lobe. Okay, the correct answer is B. Let's go over this. So, motor planning is found in what lobe? So, cerebellar, yes, it deals with movement, but it doesn't deal with the planning of movement. Frontal lobe is where motor planning is housed, because that is where we do our voluntary movement and how it comes about. Temporal lobe, it, it has more of like language, motion, visual, memory stuff than movement. And the parietal lobe focuses on sensation and proprioception and perception. So, no movement or motor planning occurs in the parietal lobe. Okay, the correct answer is D. Let's go over this one. All of the following lobes assist with memory except, so, cerebellar lobe. I mentioned very briefly in the cerebellar lobe that it also can play a role in language processing and memory. So, like I said, the lobes are really interconnected in a way. So, I mean, we can't be for sure, but from what I have in my notes and what I've looked up, it can play a role in memory. So, that's not the correct answer. B, occipital. Occipital helps with memory formation. So, this would assist in memory. The temporal lobe. The temporal lobe does have a portion of memory, a good portion of memory, because the hippocampus is located in this area. It is memory related processing and abilities that the hippocampus does. So, temporal lobe definitely plays a role in memory, whereas the parietal lobe, it doesn't really mention anything about memory, or it focuses more on sensory and that perception and proprioception and the somatosensation. Thanks for joining us on Journey to 600. Please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. I've also included links and sources in the description box below, so check those out.